Hello, everybody. I am here today to present you part of the work that I have developed for my master's thesis under the auspiciousness of the Cistercian Horizons project, which is dedicated to the study of the codices produced in the medieval scriptorium from the monastery of Alcobaça. For this presentation, I will focus on a particular book, Alc 341, which is a commentary to St. Matthew's Gospel by Godofridus Babiu and was copied by Ioannis Pecatore. This study aims at performing a full material characterization of the codex so we can determine its key characteristics that are comparable with other books within the collection. This will help us at later stages to develop a method that systematically records and compares these codices' features, which will allow us to formulate new understandings on each book and on the entire collection. In turn, it will also contribute to the characterization of the Alcobaça scriptorium, which is being carried out by the Cistercian Horizons project. In 1153, the first king of Portugal, Dom Afonso Henriques, donated a large amount of land in the central coast region of Portugal to Bernard de Clairvaux, who was the most important abbot of the Cistercian order in that period. In this land, the order erected a monastery, which evidence suggests had a working scriptorium since the end of the 12th century. Given the amount of surviving codices, it was for certain a significant production center both at national and European level. Currently, there are 467 codices attributed to the collection, of which almost 200 are considered to be medieval. About a third of these medieval codices retained materials from that period, which allowed us to divide them into two main typologies according to the covering elements. As you can see in the image, most of the books belong to a typology in which the cover is made out of a white toed leather, while a smaller amount has a brown tanned leather. Out of these 64 manuscripts, we selected Alc 341 for this study. It belongs to a larger group in which all codices are attributed to the copyist Ioannis Pecatore, given its characteristic colophon. Many of Ioannis' books still preserve medieval materials, and this one in particular has been considered by other experts, notably Nascimento and Diogo, as the one closest to its original state. These two features made us select this codex first because, on one hand, they allowed us to start identifying original medieval materials and features, and by comparison with other books determine evolutionary patterns, and on the other hand, we could keep an open door for more ambitious researches like the role of the copyist as a bookbinder, which is a question that has been raised by several scholars like the Hamel or Tock, based on historical records that they have studied. Recently, this became the case of Alcobaça as well, with the discovery of an historical record written in the 15th century, Livro da Fazenda. In this book, it is said that by that time there was a figure in the monastery, Estevão Angelorido, who knew how to prepare parchment, copy and bound the books. This might put into question the established principle that monks had specialized tasks within the production of their books. To perform the full material characterization of this codex, we resorted to codicological and advanced physicochemical analysis. We wanted to study every single part of the codex. Thus, to make it more systematically, we divided the book in its main parts. We used all these codicological techniques in every book part, but the advanced physicochemical analysis had to be selected according to each material, as you can see in the table. In terms of results, XRF spectra reveal the presence of iron in the black to brownish writing ink used in the text, which suggests the use of an iron gall ink. The green color, matte shine and fractured morphology of the green paints, plus the detection of copper in its XRF spectra and its force spectral profile with the characteristic absorption band of DT transitions centered at 700 nanometers and strongly matched with the historically accurate synthesized standard are solid indicators that we might be in the presence of a copper proteinate pigment. As for the light red paints, they appear to be composed by mercury sulfide given the opaque and very uniform morphology. Mercury's peak in the XRF spectra and the sigmoid curves with steep rises near the inflection points at about 605 nanometers of force spectra also point in this direction. In fact, the shape and position of these inflection points show electron transitions of semiconductors which are typical of mercury sulfide crystalline lattice after light absorption. In the dark red paints, digital microscopy images showed fractured slabs with a transparent red color, punctuated by clusters of colored material. Force spectra showed two reflection bands at about 523 and 568 nanometers and a low slope band with an inflection point at around 598 nanometers. These features are suggestive of an organic red-based paint like a lac dye turned into a lake pigment. The white paint appears in very small areas, no more than a millimeter square, which could not be singly analyzed with our equipment due to its larger area of analysis. This indicates that its XRF spectra was probably contaminated not only by the elements beneath it, but also by the elements around it, which explains the detection of copper and mercury in the spectra. Nonetheless, the higher peak of lead led us to believe that it might be a lead-white pigment-based paint. Though further research is in order, we also observed signals that can be attributed to an egg-white binder in the force spectra of all the paints. All these materials have been identified for other codices in this collection by authors like Miguel and Oliveira, which further supports our own results. None of the skin-based materials, like the parchment of the writing support, the leather of the cover elements, or others, were successfully identified through the observations of the follicle patterns under the digital microscope. Though in some cases we observed some patterns, we were unable to assign them to a specific animal species without the aid of a specialist. However, in a later study within the Cistercian Horizons project, these methods have achieved more positive results with the highly probable identification of bovine leather for the cover and goat and or sheep leather for smaller elements like the fastening straps. Longitudinal and transverse observations of the sewing thread under the optical microscope revealed features like the cylinder shape of the fibers marked by dislocations and cross marks. These are typical of bast fibers, however, we could not precise them further. Macroscopic plus digital, optical, and electronic microscopy observations reveal the presence of features that are consistent with the chestnut tree wood. These features include a ring porous wood with large pores well defined in early wood and no evident large rays. Smaller late wood pores are arranged in radial or diagonal chains, sometimes paired together. The vessels are of two types, long and narrow and short and wide, and they have simple perforation plates and at least two types of pits. Rays seem to be uniseriate and homocellular. The use of chestnut for bookboards has been mentioned both in national and international literature by authors like Nascimento and Diogo and Tourais. Given the area of analysis of the equipment, we could only analyze the bosses, which, apart from the nails, are the only metallic materials observed. XRF spectra showed the presence of iron, copper, lead, and tin, suggesting a copper alloy, probably bronze. This is in accordance with what has been mentioned in the literature for this period as well. Following to the codicological analysis, in the book block we have a text that was previously dated by Nascimento and Diogo to the 13th century. The characteristics of the illumination observed by our team also point to this date and are within the style of Alcobaça 13th century productions. The book block has 16 regular gatherings with 4 bifolia each, plus single folio paste downs that might have been complete end papers formed by 1 bifolia each. Alc 341 sewing was made with a Z-twisted thread at the 3 sewing stations in a simple herringbone structure. According to Tourais, this was the most commonly used structure for this period. We could not observe the kettle stitch, though there is a possibility that it is laying beneath the end bands materials. Regarding the end band structures, we did not find any parallel with previous reported cases. Each sewing station is supported by a white taut leather thong split throughout its length as shown in the image. The thongs form a round lacing attachment system. Nascimento and Diogo proposed this was a typical structure in Alcobaça region before evolving to other types more similar to what was being done throughout Europe, like the long and short lacings. The boards are of the same size of the book block, relatively thick, and have square edges. Literature suggests that all these features were common in the 13th century bindings. The cover elements were one of the most complex structures to clarify. They have 2 linings along the head and tail of the book beneath the brown cover, which at first sight made us believe it was a double cover, given the turn-ins beneath the paste downs. However, the reality is that the book just has a single brown cover attached by 2 straps of white taut leather sewn at the head, tail, and foredges. This structure encapsulates the boards and the book in its place. Small remnants indicate that the brown cover might have had extensions at the head, tail, and foredges. Curiously, at the head, the extension seems to have been made by adding a strap of white leather. We could not determine the origin of this curious feature. However, given the pattern observed at the edge of the other extension areas, we are led to believe that this strap was present all around the cover, forming most of the extensions area. 2 hypotheses that might explain this feature are the enforcement of a contingency policy in the use of these materials followed by the monastery, or another alternative, an intervention for the replacement of a damaged area. We do not believe it was a decorative function because it has not been reported nor in the literature nor in other books. On the contrary, a feature that truly must have decorative functions and has been reported by Tourais and Clarkson is the thin brown strip sewn with a blue thread. All these elements are sewn together with a very meticulous stitch. We did not find any evidence of adhesives attaching the covering elements to the boards or other elements of the book. Regarding the fastenings, we could not determine any relevant information since the two straps that had come from beneath the cover materials were cut. As for the furniture, in this book it is only composed by the circular-shaped bosses and the nails used to rivet them to the boards. All of the bosses have similar shape, but vary slightly in terms of decoration. After this detailed material characterization of Codex Alc 341, we were able to successfully identify paints, boards, and boss materials. We also gathered strong indicators for inks and threads. However, we were unsuccessful in the identification of all skin-based materials. Codicological analysis also helped us deepen Nascimento and Diogo's study by clarifying that all the binding features, and not only the board attachment system, present typical structures of the 13th century. Thus, for the next steps, we want to keep developing the techniques for the advanced material analysis to assure a clearer identification of those materials in which we weren't so successful. We also intend to compare the results here presented with other books from the same period and collection and determine if the differences and similarities we find may help us answering some of our initial questions. To do this, we will develop a tool that allows us a systematic record of information under an uniform language. This tool must also provide the means to easily and quickly analyze the information recorded. If we can achieve all these aims, we will certainly contribute to the improvement of the binding study, facilitating the circulation of information. These are the references I consulted for this study. And just to finish, I would like to thank to everyone in the audience for your attention and to all the team members in the Cistercian Horizons project that have been crucial for us to reach such interesting and promising results. In particular, to the other authors of this study, Professors Conceição Casanova and Catarina Barreira, and Doctors Catarina Gonçalves and Catarina Pinheiro. I also want to thank to Dr. Catarina Miguel and Dr. Teresa Quilhó and their teams, for they had central roles in the studies of inks and paints and wood materials, respectively. Finally, I want to thank to the National Library of Portugal for allowing us to study such wonderful books. Thank you very much.